The morning sun was bright over New York City as people rushed through the busy airport. Flight 447 to Los Angeles was preparing to board at Gate 23. The gate area was filled with travelers of all kinds. Some were business people in suits checking their phones. Others were families with excited children going on vacation. Everyone was waiting to hear their boarding group called. A tall man in his late 40s walked calmly toward the gate. He wore a perfectly fitted navy blue suit that looked expensive. His shoes were polished leather, the kind that cost more than most people's rent. On his wrist was a watch that caught the light as he moved. He carried a brown leather briefcase that looked soft and well-made. Everything about him spoke of success and money, but there was something else too. He had kind eyes and a gentle smile. He looked like someone who had worked hard for everything he had. The man reached the gate and waited patiently. He did not push forward like some passengers did. He simply stood quietly, looking at his boarding pass now and then. The pass showed seat 2A, first class, the best seats on the plane. Behind the desk at the gate stood Patricia Chen, a flight attendant who had worked for the airline for 15 years. She was in her early 50s with short brown hair pulled back tightly. Her uniform was neat and pressed. She wore her name tag with pride. Patricia had seen thousands of passengers over the years. She thought she could tell what kind of person someone was just by looking at them. She believed her experience made her a good judge of character. But sometimes experience can make people think they know more than they really do. Patricia looked up from her computer screen and saw the man in the suit approaching. Her eyes narrowed slightly. She watched him with an expression that was different from how she looked at other first-class passengers. There was suspicion in her eyes. Doubt. She glanced at him, then at his boarding pass, then back at him again. Something in her mind did not match up. She had certain ideas about who belonged in first class and who did not. The man did not fit her picture. The boarding announcement came over the speaker. First class and business class passengers were invited to board. The man stepped forward with his boarding pass ready. Patricia took it from him and scanned it. The computer beeped, accepting the pass. But instead of smiling and welcoming him aboard like she did with other first-class passengers, Patricia held onto his pass for a moment, longer than necessary. She looked at it closely as if checking for something wrong. "This is your boarding pass?" she asked. Her voice was flat, not warm like it had been with the previous passengers. "Yes, it is," the man replied softly. His voice was calm and polite. Patricia handed it back slowly. She did not say welcome aboard. She did not wish him a pleasant flight. She just watched him walk down the jet bridge with a look on her face that suggested she was not finished with this. The man entered the plane and found his seat. 2A was right at the front of first class, a window seat. He placed his briefcase in the overhead bin carefully and settled into his seat. The leather seat was wide and comfortable. He buckled his seatbelt and took out his phone to send a quick message to his assistant. He had meetings in Los Angeles tomorrow. Important ones. But today he just wanted a quiet flight where he could rest and think. Patricia boarded the plane behind him. She was the lead flight attendant on this flight, which meant she was in charge of the cabin crew. As she walked down the aisle, she kept glancing at the man in seat 2A. She whispered something to another flight attendant, a younger woman named Jessica. Jessica looked confused by whatever Patricia had said, but nodded. More passengers began boarding. A white businessman in his 60s came into first class. Patricia's face changed completely. She smiled wide and warm. "Welcome aboard, sir. Let me help you with that bag. Can I get you a drink once we're in the air? Champagne, perhaps?" Her voice was sweet and helpful. The businessman thanked her and sat down in seat 1B. A young woman in her late 20s walked into first class next. She had long dark hair and carried a laptop bag. She looked nervous, like maybe this was her first time in first class. She found her seat 2B right next to the man in the navy suit. She smiled at him shyly as she sat down. He smiled back politely and returned to his phone. The young woman's name was Maya. She worked for a tech startup in New York and was flying to Los Angeles for a conference. Her company had paid for the first-class ticket as a thank you for her hard work on a big project. She was excited but also felt out of place. She had never flown first class before. Patricia came by to check overhead bins. When she passed the white businessman, she asked again if he needed anything, calling him sir. When she passed an elderly white couple, she told them how lovely they looked. But when she reached row 2, her whole manner changed. She stopped and stared at the man in seat 2A. She looked at him for a long moment, her lips pressed together in a thin line. "Excuse me," Patricia said, her voice sharp and loud. Other passengers turned to look. "I need to see your boarding pass again." The man looked up, surprised. "I showed it at the gate," he said calmly. "I need to see it again," Patricia insisted. Her tone suggested this was not a request. It was a demand. Maya, sitting right next to him, felt her stomach tighten. Something felt wrong about this. She had watched Patricia be so nice to other passengers. Why was she being this way with this man? The man reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his boarding pass. He handed it to Patricia without complaint. His face remained calm, but Maya noticed his jaw tighten just a little. Patricia took the pass and studied it like she was looking for a mistake. She held it up to the light. She looked at the name, then at the man, then at the name again. "This says seat 2A, Patricia said slowly, as if explaining something to a child. "Yes," the man replied. "That is my seat." "First class," Patricia added, her eyebrows raised. "Yes." Patricia handed the pass back but did not move. She stood there, still staring. Other passengers were trying to get by her in the aisle, but she barely noticed. Maya could not believe what she was seeing. This felt wrong. Very wrong. "Sir, are you sure you're in the right seat?" Patricia asked loudly. Several passengers stopped talking and turned to watch. "Economy class is toward the back of the plane. Sometimes people get confused," Maya gasped quietly. The man took a slow, deep breath. "I am in the correct seat," he said. His voice was still calm, still polite, but there was steel underneath now. "This is my boarding pass. This is my seat. Is there a problem?" Patricia crossed her arms. "I just want to make sure there hasn't been any mistake." "You understand. What kind of mistake?" the man asked. He knew exactly what was happening. Maya knew too, and so did several other passengers who were now watching with shocked faces. Patricia seemed to realize she had an audience. She smiled, but it was not a kind smile. "Just doing my job, sir. Making sure all passengers are where they're supposed to be. You'd be surprised how often people try to sit in seats they didn't pay for." The air in the cabin felt thick with tension. The man looked at Patricia for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "I paid for my seat. I am in my assigned seat. Now, if you don't mind, I would like to prepare for the flight." Patricia's face flushed red. She was not used to being challenged. She opened her mouth to say something else, but the pilot's voice came over the intercom, asking all passengers to be seated for departure. Patricia had no choice but to move. But as she walked away, she threw one more suspicious look over her shoulder at the man in seat 2A. Maya turned to the man next to her. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. That was completely inappropriate. The man gave her a small, sad smile. "It happens," he said quietly. "More than you might think." Maya felt her heart break a little. Here was this man, dressed beautifully, clearly successful, sitting in a seat he had every right to sit in. And he was being treated like he didn't belong, like he had done something wrong. Just because of how he looked. She pulled out her phone. Something told her she should be ready to document what might happen next. She had a feeling this flight was going to be unlike any other. The plane's engine started with a low rumble. Flight attendants moved through the cabin doing their final checks before takeoff. Patricia walked down the aisle with a tablet in her hand, scanning seat numbers and looking at passengers. She smiled at some people and nodded at others. But when she reached row 2, her expression changed again. She stopped right next to the man in seat 2A. He was reading something on his phone, peaceful and quiet. Patricia cleared her throat loudly. The man looked up. "Yes?" he asked politely. "Sir, I need to see your boarding pass one more time," Patricia said. Her voice was loud enough that passengers several rows back could hear her clearly. The man's eyebrows went up. "I've already shown it to you twice," he said. His voice was still calm, but Maya could hear a note of tiredness in it. Like this was something he had dealt with many times before, and he was exhausted by it. "Airline policy," Patricia said sharply. "I can ask to see documentation at any time." Maya wanted to speak up. She wanted to say that Patricia had not asked any other passenger to show their boarding pass even once after boarding, let alone 3 times. But she felt frozen. She was young, and this was her first time in first class. She did not want to cause trouble. But she felt sick watching this happen. The man sighed quietly and reached for his boarding pass again. He held it up for Patricia to see. She took it from his hand and studied it with exaggerated care. She looked at every detail. turning it over, holding it up to the overhead light. "This seems legitimate," Patricia said slowly, as if she was surprised. "It is legitimate," the man replied, "because I purchased it. With my money." For this flight, Patricia's eyes narrowed. She did not like his tone. She did not like that he was not acting embarrassed or nervous. In her mind, he should have been grateful that she was allowing him to stay in first class, that she was giving him the benefit of the doubt. She felt like he was being disrespectful. "Sir, I'm going to need to ask you a few questions," Patricia said. She handed back the boarding pass but remained standing in the aisle, blocking other flight attendants who needed to pass. "What questions?" the man asked. "How did you acquire this ticket?" Patricia asked loudly. Several passengers gasped. Maya's mouth fell open. She could not believe what she was hearing. A businessman across the aisle in seat 3C looked up from his laptop with a shocked expression. The man stared at Patricia for a long moment. "I'm sorry, what?" "Your ticket. How did you get it? Did someone give it to you? Are you using someone else's frequent flyer miles?" Patricia's voice was dripping with suspicion. "Maybe you found it? Or perhaps this is some kind of upgrade situation you're not supposed to have." The cabin had gone quiet. All of first class was listening now. The man's face remained calm, but his eyes had changed. There was pain there, and anger, though he was working hard to control it. "I bought this ticket," he said slowly and clearly, "with my credit card, on the airline's website, 4 days ago. Is there anything else you need to know?" Patricia crossed her arms. "I find it hard to believe that what?" The man interrupted. His voice was still quiet, still controlled, but now there was an edge to it. "What exactly do you find hard to believe?" Patricia's face flushed. She realized she had almost said something she could not take back, something that would reveal exactly what she was thinking. She tried to recover. "I just mean that first-class tickets are very expensive," Patricia said, trying to sound reasonable. "And sometimes people make mistakes. They think they have a first-class seat when they really have an economy seat. Or they use miles they're not supposed to use. I'm trying to help you avoid embarrassment." "The only person being embarrassed right now is you," said a voice from across the aisle. Everyone turned. It was the businessman in seat 3C. He was in his 40s, white, with graying hair and glasses. He looked angry. "I've been flying for 20 years, and I've never seen a flight attendant treat a passenger this way. You've checked his boarding pass 3 times. You've questioned how he bought his ticket. What exactly are you suggesting?" Patricia's face went from red to pale.
"Sir, please stay out of this."
"I'm doing my job." "Your job is to serve passengers and ensure their safety," the businessman said firmly, "not to interrogate them about whether they belong in their seat. I've been sitting here for 10 minutes and you haven't asked to see my boarding pass once. You haven't asked me how I bought my ticket. Why is that?" Patricia stammered. That's different." "How is it different?" the businessman demanded. Patricia did not answer. She could not answer. Because everyone in that cabin knew exactly how it was different. And it had nothing to do with boarding passes or ticket prices or airline policy. Maya finally found her courage. "This is discrimination," she said. Her voice was quiet but clear. "I've been watching since we boarded. You've been rude to this man from the beginning. You haven't treated any other passenger this way." "Young lady, you don't know what you're talking about," Patricia snapped. "I've been a flight attendant for 15 years. I know how to do my job." "Then do your job," Maya said, surprised by her own bravery. "Stop harassing this passenger." Other passengers began to murmur agreement. An elderly woman in seat 4A said "hear, hear" in a crisp British accent. A couple in row 3 nodded their heads. Patricia looked around and realized she was losing control of the situation. "Everyone needs to mind their own business," Patricia said loudly. "This is between me and this passenger." "No," said the man in seat 2A. He spoke quietly, but his voice carried through the cabin. "If you're going to accuse me of something in front of all these people, then they are part of this conversation too. So please tell everyone, what exactly are you accusing me of?" Patricia's mouth opened and closed. She was trapped. If she said what she was really thinking, she would be clearly stating her prejudice for everyone to hear. But if she backed down now, she would look foolish and wrong. "I'm not accusing you of anything," Patricia said stiffly. "I was simply verifying your ticket, which is my right as senior flight attendant on this aircraft." "You verified it 3 times, the man said, "and you questioned how I bought it. You suggested I might have found it or stolen someone's miles. You implied I don't belong in this seat. He paused, looking directly into Patricia's eyes. We both know why you did that. Everyone on this plane knows why you did that. So please don't insult my intelligence by pretending this is about airline policy. The cabin was silent. Even the usual sounds of the plane seemed to fade away. Patricia stood there, her face burning, her hands shaking slightly. She had been challenged before by passengers. People complained about service or got angry about delays. But she had never been called out like this. Never had her deepest biases exposed in front of a cabin full of witnesses. I'm going to have to ask you to watch your tone, Patricia said, her voice shaking. Or I will have to report you for being disruptive. Disruptive? The businessman in 3C said loudly. He's been nothing but calm and polite. You're the one being disruptive. You're the one making a scene. I have the authority to remove passengers from this aircraft if I feel they are a threat to safety or the comfort of other passengers, Patricia said, her voice rising. On what grounds? Asked the British woman. He's done nothing wrong. We're all witnesses to that. Patricia looked around wildly. She felt cornered. Attacked. In her mind, she was the victim here. These passengers didn't understand. They didn't know how hard her job was, how many difficult passengers she dealt with, how she had to be careful about who she let into first class because some people just didn't belong there. Fine, Patricia said coldly. She looked at the man in seat 2A with barely disguised hatred. But I'll be watching you. Very closely. And if you step 1 foot out of line, you will be removed from this flight. Do you understand? The man looked at her with such sadness that even some of the passengers who had been defending him felt a chill. I understand perfectly, he said quietly. I understand that no matter what I achieve, no matter how much money I have, no matter how I dress or speak or behave, there will always be people like you who look at me and see something less than human. Patricia gasped. How dare you? Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. A voice boomed over the intercom. Patricia jumped. We've been cleared for takeoff. Flight attendants, please take your seats for departure. Patricia had no choice. She had to follow the captain's orders. She shot one more venomous look at the man in seat 2A, then stalked toward the front of the plane where the attendant jump seats were located. As she passed, several passengers glared at her. One man shook his head in disgust. Maya pulled out her phone and quickly started typing. She had the social media apps open. Her fingers shook as she wrote a message describing what she had just witnessed. But she stopped before posting. She looked at the man next to her. Is it okay if I post about this? She asked quietly. I won't use your name or take your picture, but people should know what just happened. The man was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. Do what you think is right, he said. But be prepared. Once you post something like this, you can't take it back. Maya nodded. She understood. But she also knew that staying silent was not an option. Not after what she had just seen. The plane lifted into the sky. Maya watched through the window as New York grew smaller below them. The city looked peaceful from up here. Clean and organized. Nothing like the ugly scene that had just happened in the cabin. She glanced at the man beside her. He was looking straight ahead, his face unreadable. But she noticed his hands were gripping the armrests tightly. The seatbelt sign dinged off. Passengers began to relax. Some pulled out laptops. Others reclined their seats and closed their eyes. But the tension in first class had not gone away. It hung in the air like smoke. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Patricia unbuckled from her jump seat and stood up. She smoothed her uniform and put on a professional smile. She picked up a tray with bottles of water and small packages of nuts. She began walking down the aisle, offering refreshments to the first-class passengers. Good morning, sir, she said warmly to the man in seat 1A. Can I offer you some water? Perhaps some mixed nuts or pretzels. Water would be lovely, thank you, the man replied. Patricia handed him a bottle with a smile and moved on. She approached the elderly British woman in seat 4A. Madam, may I offer you a beverage and snack? The woman looked at Patricia coldly. I'll wait, thank you, she said in a tone that made it clear she wanted nothing from Patricia. Patricia's smile faltered, but she continued. She worked her way through the cabin, offering drinks and snacks to each passenger. She was polite to everyone, warm even. But as she got closer to row 2, her expression began to change. Her smile became forced. Her movements became stiff. She stopped at row 2. She offered water and snacks to Maya first. "Miss, would you like something to drink?" "Yes, please," Maya said. "Water would be great." Patricia handed her a bottle and a package of almonds. Then Patricia turned to the businessman across the aisle in seat 2C. She gave him the same warm smile she had given earlier passengers. "Sir, what can I get for you?" But she did not look at the man in seat 2A. She completely skipped him. She acted as if his seat was empty. As if he did not exist, Maya stared in disbelief. The man noticed too. He waited for a moment, thinking perhaps Patricia had simply overlooked him by accident. But Patricia moved on to the next row without offering him anything. "Excuse me," the man said politely. His voice was calm but loud enough for Patricia to hear clearly. Patricia kept walking. "Excuse me," the man said again, louder this time. Patricia stopped. She turned slowly, her face showing annoyance. "Yes?" she said sharply. "I would like some water, please," the man said. Patricia stared at him for a long moment. Then she said, "I'll get to you when I have time." "You just served everyone else in this section," the man pointed out. "You only skipped me." "I said I'll get to you when I have time," Patricia repeated coldly. The businessman in 3C looked up from his laptop. "Are you serious right now?" he said to Patricia. "You're going to refuse to serve him?" "I'm not refusing anything," Patricia said defensively. "I simply have other passengers to attend to first." "You already attended to everyone else," the businessman said. "You deliberately skipped him. We all saw it." Other passengers were paying attention now. An older man in seat 5B shook his head. A young couple in row 6 whispered to each other, looking shocked. Patricia felt all the eyes on her. She felt judged. In her mind, these passengers didn't understand. This man had been disrespectful to her earlier. He had challenged her authority. He had made her look bad in front of everyone. Why should she give him good service? Why should she smile and be warm to someone who had treated her so poorly? But she could not say any of that out loud. So instead she said, "Fine, I'll get you some water." She walked to the galley at the front of the plane, her back stiff with anger. The passengers in first class exchanged glances. Maya leaned over to the man. "This is unbelievable," she whispered. "I'm documenting everything. I work in tech. I know people who can make sure this gets seen." The man gave her a small smile. "Thank you," he said quietly. "But be careful. Standing up for others can sometimes bring trouble to yourself." "I don't care," Maya said, and she realized she meant it. She had never been the kind of person to make waves. She usually stayed quiet and avoided conflict. But something about this situation had awakened something in her. A sense of justice. A refusal to stay silent. Patricia returned from the galley. She was holding a small plastic cup, the kind you might get in economy class. It was filled halfway with water. She walked to row 2 and practically threw the cup down on the man's tray table. Water sloshed over the side. She did not offer him nuts or pretzels. She did not smile. She just stood there with her arms crossed. "Your water," she said flatly. The man looked at the small plastic cup. Then he looked at the glass bottles of water that every other first-class passenger had received. The contrast was deliberate and obvious. "I would like a bottle, please," the man said, like everyone else received. "We're running low on bottles," Patricia lied. "You'll have to make do with the cup." "There are bottles right there in your cart," the businessman in 3C said loudly. "I can see at least 10 of them." Patricia's jaw clenched. "Those are reserved for other passengers." "What other passengers?" the British woman demanded. "Everyone in first class has been served. You have plenty of bottles." Patricia felt like she was being attacked from all sides. These passengers were ganging up on her. They were making her out to be the villain when she was just doing her job. When she was just being cautious. When she was just making sure that standards were maintained in first class. "I am the senior flight attendant on this aircraft," Patricia said, her voice rising. "I make the decisions about service. If I say he gets a cup, he gets a cup. If any of you have a problem with that, you can file a complaint after we land." "Oh, we will," the businessman said grimly. "Believe me, we will." Patricia's face turned red. She leaned closer to the man in seat 2A. Her voice dropped lower, but it was loud enough that people nearby could still hear. "You know what your problem is?" she said. "You think you're better than everyone else. You think you can buy a first-class ticket and suddenly you belong here. But you don't. People like you will never belong in places like this, no matter how much money you throw around. I see right through you. I know your type. The cabin went completely silent. Even the hum of the plane engine seemed to fade away. Everyone was staring at Patricia in horror. What she had just said could not be misunderstood. There was no way to interpret it as anything other than what it was. Pure, ugly prejudice. The man in seat 2A looked up at Patricia. His eyes were filled with such deep sadness that even Patricia felt a flicker of something. Shame, perhaps. Or fear of what she had just revealed about herself. My type, the man repeated softly. And what type is that exactly? Patricia realized she had gone too far. She had said the quiet part out loud. She had revealed what she had been thinking all along, and now there was no taking it back. I didn't mean, she stammered. Yes, you did, the man said. His voice was gentle but firm. You meant exactly what you said. You've meant it from the moment I walked onto this plane. Maybe you've meant it your whole life. Maybe you don't even realize how deeply it's buried in you. But I see it. We all see it now. How dare you analyze me, Patricia snapped. She was defensive now, trying to regain control. You don't know anything about me. You don't know what I've been through, how hard I've worked. You're right, the man said. I don't know your story, just like you don't know mine. But you decided you knew everything about me the moment you saw me. You decided I didn't belong here. You decided I must have stolen this ticket, or lied my way into this seat. You decided all of that based on nothing but what I look like. Patricia opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out, because he was right, and everyone knew it. I would like to speak to the head flight attendant, the man said calmly. Patricia let out a harsh laugh. I am the head flight attendant on this flight. I'm the most senior crew member in this cabin, so if you have a complaint, you can complain to me. Then I would like to speak to the captain, the man said. The captain is busy flying the plane, Patricia said dismissively. He doesn't have time to deal with passenger complaints about not getting a bottle of water. This isn't about water, the businessman in 3C said. He stood up from his seat. He was tall, over 6 feet, and he looked angry. This is about discrimination. This is about a member of your crew treating a paying passenger like dirt, for no reason other than racism. Don't you dare use that word, Patricia said, her voice shaking. I am not racist. I have black friends. I have served black passengers thousands of times. I treat everyone the same. You don't treat everyone the same, Maya said. She was shaking, but her voice was strong. I've been sitting here watching you. You've been horrible to this man from the start. You've questioned his ticket 3 times. You suggested he stole it. You skipped serving him. You gave him a plastic cup when everyone else got bottles. And then you said he doesn't belong here. We all heard it. You're twisting my words, Patricia protested. We're not twisting anything, the British woman said. We have ears. We heard exactly what you said. And I, for one, am appalled. In all my years of flying, I have never witnessed such disgraceful behavior from a crew member. Patricia looked around the cabin wildly. Every face was looking at her with disgust or anger or disappointment. She felt cornered, trapped. How had this happened? She was just doing her job. She was just being careful. Why couldn't they understand that? All of you need to sit down and mind your own business, Patricia said loudly. I have the authority to report all of you for interfering with crew duties. I can have every single one of you banned from flying with this airline. Let me tell you something, the man in seat 2A said quietly. He had not raised his voice once during this entire ordeal. But now when he spoke, everyone listened. You can treat me however you want. You can give me plastic cups while others get bottles. You can question my right to sit in this seat. You can suggest I'm a criminal or a liar. I've dealt with worse than you. But these passengers have done nothing wrong. They simply stood up for what's right. And if you try to punish them for that, you will face consequences. Real ones. There was something in his tone, something that suggested he was not making an empty threat. Patricia felt a chill run down her spine. For the first time, doubt crept into her mind. What if she had made a mistake? What if this man was not who she thought he was? But her pride wouldn't let her back down now. An hour passed. The plane flew smoothly through the clear blue sky. The pilot had announced they were at cruising altitude, and the weather was perfect for the rest of the flight to Los Angeles. Under normal circumstances, this would be a peaceful, pleasant journey. But in first class, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Patricia continued her duties, but her service had become even more pointed. Every time she walked past row 2, she made sure to ignore the man in seat 2A. She would stop and chat warmly with passengers in front of him and behind him. She would ask if they needed anything, if they were comfortable, if she could bring them another drink or a snack. But when it came to the man, she acted like his seat was empty. The meal service began. In first class, passengers had a choice between 2 hot meals. Patricia worked her way through the cabin with a cart, describing the options to each passenger. There was herb-roasted chicken with vegetables or pasta with a cream sauce. Both came with a salad, bread, and a dessert. Patricia stopped at row 1. "Sir, for your meal today, we have herb-roasted chicken or pasta with cream sauce. Which would you prefer?" "The chicken, please," the passenger said. Patricia served him with a smile. She placed the tray carefully on his table, making sure everything was arranged nicely. She poured him a glass of wine from a real glass bottle.
She offered him fresh ground pepper for his salad.
She treated him like royalty. She moved to the next row. Same warm service, same attention to detail. She chatted pleasantly with the elderly British woman, even though the woman's responses were cold. Patricia seemed determined to win her over. Then she reached row 2. She served Maya first. "Miss, we have chicken or pasta for you today." "The pasta, please," Maya said quietly. She felt sick to her stomach about what was happening, but she didn't know how to stop it. Patricia served Maya with the same care she had shown other passengers. She arranged the tray nicely. She poured wine. She offered pepper. Then she turned to serve the businessman across the aisle, but she completely skipped the man in seat 2A. The man waited. He thought maybe she would come back to him. Maybe she was serving in a different order today. But Patricia moved on to row 3 without saying a word to him. "Excuse me," the man said politely. "I would like to order my meal, please." Patricia pretended not to hear him. She continued serving the passenger in row 3. "Excuse me," the man said louder. "I need to order my meal." Patricia sighed heavily like he was bothering her. She turned around slowly. "What?" she said rudely. "I would like to order my meal," the man said. His patience was clearly wearing thin, but he kept his voice level. "We're running low on meals," Patricia said. "I'm not sure we have enough for everyone." "You just started serving," the businessman in 3C said. "How can you possibly be running low already?" "That's none of your concern," Patricia snapped at him. "I would like to order, please," the man in seat 2A said firmly. "The airline sold me a first-class ticket which includes a meal. I would like that meal." Patricia stared at him with undisguised dislike. "Fine. You can have whatever's left after I serve everyone else." "That's not acceptable," the man said. "I would like to choose my meal now like every other passenger." "And I said you'll get what's left," Patricia repeated. Her voice was getting louder. "I don't have time to stand here arguing with you." "This is outrageous," said the British woman. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up. Even though she was small and elderly, she had a commanding presence. "Young woman, I have been flying for 50 years. I have traveled all over the world, and I have never in all my life seen such abhorrent treatment of a passenger. You should be ashamed of yourself." "Please sit down, madam," Patricia said through gritted teeth. "You're violating safety regulations by standing during service." "Oh, don't you dare talk to me about regulations," the woman said. "You're violating every standard of human decency. This man has done nothing wrong, nothing, and you are treating him like he's beneath you, like he's not worthy of basic respect." Other passengers began to speak up. A man in row 4 said, "She's right. This has gone too far." A woman in row 5 added, "Someone needs to report this." A young man in row 6 was already typing furiously on his phone. Patricia felt the situation spiraling out of her control again. But instead of backing down, she doubled down. It was a defense mechanism. When she felt attacked, she attacked back harder. "If everyone doesn't sit down and be quiet, I'm going to have to call the captain," Patricia said loudly. "And I will have this entire section removed from the flight when we land. You'll all be banned from flying. Is that what you want?" "Call the captain," the businessman in 3C said. "Please call him right now, because I want to talk to him about you." Patricia's face went pale, then red, then pale again. She knew she was in trouble. She knew she had pushed too far, but her pride wouldn't let her admit it. "Fine," she said coldly. She looked at the man in seat 2A. "What do you want? Chicken or pasta?" "Chicken, please," the man said quietly. Patricia grabbed a meal tray from her cart. But instead of the nice presentation she had given everyone else, she practically threw the tray onto his table. The food shifted on the plate. The salad dressing spilled slightly. The bread roll bounced and fell onto the seat. She did not offer him wine. She did not offer him pepper. She did not arrange anything nicely. She just dumped the food and walked away. Maya stared at her own meal. She couldn't eat it. Her stomach was in knots. She looked at the man beside her. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "It's not your fault," the man said. He picked up the bread roll from his seat and placed it back on his tray. He looked at the messy plate and the spilled salad dressing. Then he did something that surprised everyone watching. He smiled, a small, sad smile. "You know what's funny?" he said quietly. "I could buy this entire airline if I wanted to. I have enough money to buy 100 planes like this one. But none of that matters to her. Because when she looks at me, all she sees is something she fears or hates or thinks is beneath her." "Who are you?" Maya whispered. The man looked at her. "Just someone trying to get to Los Angeles," he said. Just like everyone else on this plane. But Maya knew there was more to the story. She had sensed it from the beginning. This man had an air about him. A quiet dignity. A sense of accomplishment and power that he didn't need to announce. She pulled out her phone and opened Google. She started searching. Tech billionaires. Black entrepreneurs. Philanthropists. Her eyes widened as she scrolled through results. Meanwhile, Patricia had returned to the galley. Another flight attendant, Jessica, approached her. Jessica was younger, maybe 25. She had been watching everything that happened with growing concern. "Patricia," Jessica said quietly, "can I talk to you for a minute?" "What?" Patricia said sharply. She was in a bad mood and didn't want to be bothered. "That passenger in 2A, Jessica said. "The way you're treating him. It's not right. People are noticing. I think you should apologize and try to make things right before this gets worse." Patricia stared at Jessica like she had grown a second head. "Apologize for what?" "For doing my job. For maintaining standards." "Standards?" Jessica repeated. "Patricia, you've been rude to him from the moment he boarded. You've questioned his ticket multiple times. You've skipped serving him. You threw his food at him. That's not standards. That's discrimination." "Don't you start too," Patricia said angrily. "You young people think everything is discrimination. You don't understand how the real world works. Some people just don't belong in first class. They don't have the manners. They don't have the breeding. They don't understand the culture." Jessica stared at Patricia in shock. "Are you listening to yourself? Do you hear what you're saying?" "I'm saying the truth," Patricia said. "Something people are too scared to say anymore. I've worked in first class for 15 years. I know who belongs here and who doesn't." "Based on what?" Jessica demanded. "Based on their skin color?" "Based on everything," Patricia said. "The way they carry themselves. The way they talk. The way they act. That man has been nothing but trouble since he boarded. He's been disrespectful to me. He's caused other passengers to gang up on me. He's making my job difficult." "He's been perfectly polite," Jessica said. "You're the one who started this by treating him badly. And now you're making it worse. Patricia, please. I'm asking you as a colleague. Apologize to him. Make this right before we land. Because if this continues, you're going to lose your job." Patricia laughed bitterly. "Lose my job? I've been here for 15 years. I have seniority. I have a perfect record. They're not going to fire me over one difficult passenger." "Your record isn't perfect anymore," Jessica said quietly. "Half the first-class cabin is recording this on their phones. By the time we land, this is going to be all over social media. The airline will have to respond. And when they do, whose side do you think they're going to take?" For the first time, real fear flickered across Patricia's face. Social media videos, she hadn't thought about that. She had been so focused on maintaining her authority, on putting this man in his place, that she hadn't considered the bigger picture. But it was too late to back down now. If she apologized, she would be admitting she was wrong. She would be admitting that everything she had done was based on prejudice and bias. She couldn't do that. Her pride wouldn't allow it. "Let them record," Patricia said stubbornly. "When the airline reviews the tapes, they'll see that I was just doing my job. They'll see that I was dealing with a difficult passenger who was being disrespectful." Jessica shook her head sadly. "That's not what the videos will show, Patricia. And you know it." Patricia turned away from Jessica and busied herself with cleaning up the galley. But her hands were shaking. For the first time since this whole situation began, doubt was creeping in. What if Jessica was right? What if she had made a terrible mistake? Back in the cabin, the man in seat 2A ate his meal quietly. He didn't complain about the presentation or the spilled dressing or the rough service. He simply ate, looking out the window at the clouds passing by. But inside he was tired, so very tired. Tired of proving himself. Tired of being treated like he didn't belong. Tired of keeping his composure when all he wanted to do was scream at the injustice of it all. Maya watched him with admiration and heartbreak. She had found what she was looking for on her phone, and what she had discovered made her gasp out loud. Maya stared at her phone screen, her eyes growing wider with each sentence she read. Her hand trembled slightly as she scrolled through article after article. Headlines jumped out at her. Photos showed the man sitting next to her at charity events, accepting awards, standing with world leaders and celebrities. Her mouth fell open as she read about his accomplishments. She looked up from her phone and glanced at the man beside her. He was still gazing out the window, peaceful despite everything that had happened. Maya felt her heart racing. She wanted to say something, but the words stuck in her throat. Should she tell him she knew who he was? Would that make things weird? Would he think she was just another person who treated him differently because of his fame and money? But she had to say something. She had to let him know that she understood now just how wrong Patricia had been. How absolutely, incredibly, devastatingly wrong. "I'm sorry," Maya whispered, leaning slightly toward him. "I don't mean to invade your privacy, but I think I know who you are." The man turned from the window and looked at her. His expression was kind but tired. "It's okay," he said quietly. "I figured someone would recognize me eventually. I'm surprised it took this long, honestly." "Does she know?" Maya asked, gesturing toward the front of the plane where Patricia was. "Does she have any idea?" The man shook his head. "No, and that's actually the point, isn't it? She didn't bother to find out anything about me. She just made assumptions based on what she saw. And what she saw was just my skin color. Nothing else mattered to her." Maya felt tears prickling her eyes. "I can't believe this. You've donated millions to education. You've created thousands of jobs. You've been on the cover of Forbes magazine 3 times. And she treated you like you were nobody." "I am nobody," the man said gently. "Or I should be allowed to be nobody. That's the point. I shouldn't need to be famous or rich or accomplished for people to treat me with basic human dignity. Every person on this plane deserves respect, regardless of who they are or what they've done or how much money they have." Maya nodded, wiping her eyes. "You're right. Of course you're right. But still, when she finds out, she's going to die of embarrassment." "Maybe," the man said, "or maybe she'll just find a way to justify it to herself. People like her usually do." While they were talking, something was happening a few rows back. The tech entrepreneur in seat 3A, the one who had defended the man earlier, was also on his phone. He had been scrolling through business news, checking his emails, when something caught his eye. An article about recent tech investments. There was a photo accompanying the article. A photo of someone he recognized. The entrepreneur leaned forward in his seat, squinting at the photo on his phone. Then he looked up at the man in seat 2A, then back at his phone. His eyes went wide. He felt like he had been struck by lightning. "Oh my God," he muttered under his breath. His wife, sitting next to him, looked over. "What's wrong?" "That man," the entrepreneur whispered, pointing subtly toward row 2. "The one that flight attendant has been harassing." "What about him?" "He's him," the entrepreneur said, his voice full of awe. "He's the one who just invested $200 million in renewable energy. He's the one who built 3 hospitals in underserved communities. He's one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the country. And that flight attendant just treated him like he was a criminal." The wife grabbed her husband's phone and read the article. Her face went pale. "No way, are you sure?" "I'm positive," the entrepreneur said. "I've seen him speak at conferences. I've read his interviews. That's definitely him." The entrepreneur felt torn. Should he say something? Should he tell the other passengers? Or would that violate the man's privacy? The man clearly wanted a quiet flight. He had been patient and dignified through all of Patricia's abuse. Maybe he didn't want attention drawn to his identity. But the entrepreneur also felt a sense of justice burning in his chest. Patricia needed to know what she had done. She needed to understand the magnitude of her mistake, not because famous people deserve better treatment than others, but because her assumptions had been so spectacularly, humiliatingly wrong. The entrepreneur made a decision. He unbuckled his seatbelt and walked up to row 2. He bent down between the seats and spoke quietly to the man. "Excuse me," the entrepreneur said. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I think I recognize you. I was at the Tech Summit in San Francisco last year. I heard you speak about innovation and social responsibility. Your speech changed how I think about business." The man smiled slightly. "Thank you. That's very kind. I don't want to make a big deal about this," the entrepreneur continued, "but I think you should know that word is starting to spread. People are figuring out who you are, and when that flight attendant finds out, she's going to wish she could disappear." The man sighed. "I didn't want this to become about who I am. I wanted it to be about how wrong it is to treat anyone the way she treated me. Famous or not, rich or poor, everyone deserves basic respect." "You're absolutely right," the entrepreneur said. "But the truth is going to come out anyway. Half the people in first class are on their phones right now. Social media is probably already exploding. This is going to be huge news." The man nodded slowly. He had known this was a possibility. He had hoped to handle it quietly. Maybe file a complaint with the airline after landing. But that ship had sailed. Too many people had witnessed Patricia's behavior. Too many people had recordings. The story was already out there, spreading like wildfire across the internet. "What's your name?" the man asked the entrepreneur. "James," the entrepreneur replied. "James Chen. Well, James, I appreciate you coming to talk to me. And I appreciate you standing up for me earlier. That took courage." "It was the right thing to do," James said. "And honestly, even if I didn't know who you were, it would still be the right thing. What she did was wrong, period." The two men shook hands. James returned to his seat, but he couldn't sit still. He felt energized, excited even. He pulled up Twitter on his phone and started typing a thread about what he had just witnessed on his flight. He didn't name the man, but he described the situation in detail. He talked about the discrimination, the rudeness, the shocking behavior of the flight attendant. He ended with a simple statement. "And when this flight attendant finds out who she was insulting, she's going to regret every word she said." James hit post and watched as his thread immediately started getting likes and retweets. Within minutes, it had hundreds of interactions. Within 10 minutes, thousands. People were outraged. They were sharing their own stories of discrimination. They were tagging the airline. They were demanding action. Back in the cabin, more passengers were making the connection. A woman in row 4 gasped and showed her phone to her husband. "That's him," she whispered excitedly. "The philanthropist who just donated $50 million to education programs. I saw him on the news last week." A college student in row 5 recognized him from an article she had read for a business class. A retired teacher in row 6 remembered seeing him on a talk show discussing the importance of giving back to communities. Soon, almost everyone in first class knew or was finding out. The cabin was buzzing with whispered conversations and shocked exclamations. People were pulling up articles, showing each other photos, reading about his accomplishments and charitable work. The more they learned, the more horrified they became by Patricia's treatment of him. But they were also angry. Not just because he was famous or rich, but because his fame and accomplishments highlighted just how wrong Patricia's assumptions had been. She had looked at him and seen someone who didn't belong, someone who must have cheated or lied to get into first class. She couldn't have been more wrong. The British woman unbuckled her seatbelt and walked up to row 2. She introduced herself as Margaret. "I want to apologize," she said to the man. "Not for my behavior, but on behalf of all of us who didn't speak up sooner. You shouldn't have had to endure that." "No one should, thank you," the man said graciously. "But you did speak up. You defended me when you didn't have to. That means more than you know." Margaret smiled warmly. Then she lowered her voice. "I know who you are now. I read about your work with veterans programs. My late husband was a veteran. What you're doing, the hospitals you're building, the job training programs. It's remarkable." The man looked uncomfortable with the praise. "I'm just trying to use my resources to help people. That's what anyone in my position should do." "Most people in your position don't," Margaret said. "That's what makes you special. But you shouldn't need to be special to be treated with basic human respect. That flight attendant should be ashamed of herself." As Margaret returned to her seat, a line began to form. One by one, passengers approached the man to apologize, to express their support, to tell him they had documented everything. A father with his teenage daughter came up. The father said, "I want my daughter to see how you handled this. You kept your dignity and your composure even when you were being treated terribly. That's the kind of character I want her to learn from. The man spoke with each person kindly and humbly, but Maya could see the toll it was taking on him. His smile became more forced. His shoulders sagged slightly. This was supposed to be a quiet flight. Instead, it had become a spectacle. Up in the galley, Patricia was oblivious to what was happening in the cabin. She was busy restocking supplies and filling out paperwork. Jessica, the younger flight attendant, approached her again. "Patricia," Jessica said urgently, "you need to come see this." "See what?" Patricia said without looking up. "The passengers. They're all gathered around that man in 2A. Something is happening." Patricia looked up, annoyed. "What are they doing? Are they bothering him?" "I told everyone to stay in their seats." "Just come look," Jessica insisted. Patricia walked to the galley entrance and peered out into the cabin. She saw a cluster of passengers standing around row 2. They were talking, showing each other their phones, taking pictures, but not pictures of the man. Pictures of their phones? Screenshots of articles and news stories. "What is going on out there?" Patricia muttered. "This is a safety violation. People need to return to their seats." She marched into the cabin, ready to assert her authority once again. But as she approached, she heard snippets of conversation that made her pause. "Donated $50 million just last month. Forbes said he's one of the top entrepreneurs under 50. Built hospitals in 3 cities, worth over $2 billion. Patricia felt something cold settle in her stomach. She moved closer, trying to hear better without being obvious. A passenger was showing his phone to another passenger. On the screen was a photo of the man in seat 2A shaking hands with the President of the United States. Patricia's world tilted on its axis. Patricia stood frozen in the aisle, her face slowly draining of all color. She stared at the phone screen showing the man shaking hands with the President. Then she looked at the man in seat 2A, then back at the phone. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. "Excuse me," she said weakly to the passengers crowding the aisle. Everyone needs to return to their seats. But no one listened to her. They were too busy talking, too excited by their discovery. Patricia felt invisible, which was ironic considering how much attention she had demanded all flight. "Did you see this article?" one passenger was saying to another. "He started his company in his garage with just $5,000. Now he employs over 10,000 people. I read that he gives away 30% of his income every year," another passenger added. 30%! To schools, hospitals, community programs. Can you imagine? "And that flight attendant treated him like trash," someone else said loudly. "Like he didn't belong here. It's disgusting." Patricia felt her knees go weak. She grabbed the back of a seat to steady herself. This couldn't be happening. This had to be some kind of mistake. That man couldn't possibly be who they were saying he was. He couldn't be famous. He couldn't be rich. He couldn't be important. But deep down, Patricia knew it was true. The evidence was right there on everyone's phones. Articles from major newspapers, photos from charity events, videos of speeches and interviews. It was all real. Jessica appeared beside Patricia and gently took her arm. "Come on," Jessica said quietly. "Let's go back to the galley." Patricia let herself be led away, her legs moving automatically while her mind spun in circles. In the galley, she collapsed onto a jump seat. She felt like she might throw up. "Oh God," Patricia whispered. "Oh God, what have I done?" "You discriminated against a passenger," Jessica said bluntly. "You were rude and insulting. You questioned his right to be in first class, and now everyone knows who he is and how wrong you were." "But I didn't know," Patricia said desperately. "I didn't know he was famous. How was I supposed to know?" "You weren't supposed to know," Jessica said. "That's the point, Patricia. You're supposed to treat every passenger with respect, whether they're famous or not. Whether they're rich or poor. Whether they're black or white. Everyone deserves the same standard of service." Patricia put her head in her hands. "My career is over. They're going to fire me. 15 years gone." "You did this to yourself," Jessica said, not unkindly. "Every choice you made today, you made yourself. You chose to question his ticket 3 times. You chose to skip serving him. You chose to give him a plastic cup while everyone else got bottles. You chose to throw his food at him. And you chose to tell him he doesn't belong in first class." "I didn't mean it the way it sounded," Patricia said weakly. "Yes, you did," Jessica replied. "We both know you did. And now you have to face the consequences." At that moment, the intercom crackled to life. The captain's voice filled the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Rodriguez. We'll be beginning our descent into Los Angeles shortly. I wanted to take a moment to make a special announcement. Patricia's head snapped up. Terror filled her eyes. No, she whispered. No, please no, the captain continued. It has come to my attention that we have a very distinguished guest aboard our flight today. I want to extend a personal welcome and thank you to the gentleman in seat 2A, a renowned entrepreneur, philanthropist, and community leader whose work has touched millions of lives. Sir, we are deeply honored to have you flying with us today. The entire first-class cabin erupted. Passengers cheered and clapped. Some stood up to applaud. The man in seat 2A, clearly uncomfortable with the attention, raised his hand in a modest wave and nodded his thanks. But the captain wasn't finished. I also want to apologize on behalf of our airline for any less than exemplary service you may have received during this flight. Please know that this does not reflect our company's values or standards. We will be addressing this matter immediately upon landing. The applause died down. An uncomfortable silence fell over the cabin. Everyone turned to look toward the galley where Patricia stood frozen in the doorway. Her face was now bright red, tears streaming down her cheeks. She looked like she wanted the floor to open up and swallow her whole. The businessman, James, stood up. Captain, he called out loud enough for his voice to carry. I think I speak for everyone in first class when I say we've all witnessed the mistreatment this gentleman endured today. Multiple passengers, including myself, have video documentation of the entire incident. We're prepared to provide statements and evidence if needed. Other passengers voiced their agreement. I recorded everything, one woman said. It was appalling, a man added. Worst display of customer service I've ever seen, said another. Patricia wanted to run. She wanted to disappear. But there was nowhere to go on a plane at 30,000 feet. She was trapped with her shame and the consequences of her actions. Maya looked at the man beside her. Despite everything, despite being vindicated and supported by everyone around him, he didn't look happy. He looked sad. Tired, are you okay? Maya asked quietly. The man sighed. I've been through worse, he said. But it never gets easier. Every time something like this happens, I hope it will be the last time. And every time I'm disappointed, I'm so sorry, Maya said. For all of it. It's not your fault, the man assured her. You stood up for me when you didn't have to. You saw what was happening and you said something. That takes courage. Thank you. Maya felt tears in her eyes. I posted about it on social media, she admitted. I hope that's okay. I didn't use your name or show your face, but I described what happened. It's already been shared thousands of times, the man nodded. That's fine. People should know. Maybe if enough people speak up about this kind of treatment, things will start to change. The plane began its descent. Flight attendants moved through the cabin, collecting trash and ensuring seats were upright and tray tables were stored. Jessica handled first-class service. Patricia remained in the galley, unable to face the passengers. As they descended, passengers continued to approach the man. An elderly black couple stopped by his seat. The woman had tears in her eyes. Thank you, she said to him, for handling that situation with such grace. My husband and I, we've experienced things like that our whole lives. We're both in our 70s and it still happens. But seeing how you responded with dignity and calm, it gives me hope that maybe our grandchildren will grow up in a better world. The man stood and embraced the woman gently. We have to believe it will get better, he said. And we have to keep speaking up when we see injustice. All of us together. Even some passengers who hadn't been sitting in first class had heard about the incident. Word had spread to economy class through texts and social media posts. When the plane landed and taxied to the gate, people in the back of the plane were craning their necks to try to see the man everyone was talking about. As the plane came to a complete stop at the gate, the captain made another announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated for a moment. We have some special guests meeting our flight. The door opened. Instead of passengers deplaning, two people in airline uniforms entered the plane. One was a woman in her 50s, wearing a name tag that said station manager. The other was a man in his 40s identified as customer relations supervisor. Behind them stood two airport security officers, the station manager walked directly to Roe. She smiled warmly at the man. Sir, I'm Margaret Hayes, the station manager here at LAX. I want to personally apologize for your experience on this flight. This is not who we are as an airline. We have a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination of any kind. Your treatment today was unacceptable and we take full responsibility." The man stood and shook her hand. "I appreciate that," he said. "But I want to be clear about something. I don't want special treatment because of who I am or what I've accomplished. I want every passenger to be treated with respect and dignity. What happened to me today happens to people every day. People who aren't famous and don't have resources to fight back. That's what needs to change." "You're absolutely right," Margaret said. "And I promise you we will use this incident as a teaching moment for our entire staff. We'll be reviewing our training programs and our policies to ensure this never happens again." She turned and looked toward the galley. "Patricia Chen, please come here." Patricia emerged from the galley, her face blotchy from crying, her hands shaking. She walked slowly down the aisle, aware that every eye in first class was on her. She looked like she might faint. Margaret addressed her firmly. "Patricia, you are being suspended effective immediately pending a full investigation into today's incident. You need to collect your belongings and come with us. Security will escort you off the aircraft." Patricia's lips trembled. She looked at the man in seat 2A, and for the first time all flight she seemed to really see him, not as a threat or an intruder or someone who didn't belong, but as a human being she had hurt. "I'm sorry," Patricia whispered. The words came out broken and small. The cabin was silent. Everyone waited to see how the man would respond. He looked at Patricia for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "I believe you are sorry. I believe you're sorry you got caught. I believe you're sorry your actions have consequences. But are you sorry for how you treated me? Are you sorry for the assumptions you made? Are you sorry for the prejudice in your heart? That's the real question." Patricia opened her mouth, but no words came, because she didn't know the answer. She had spent so many years believing certain things, judging people by certain standards, making certain assumptions. Could she really let all that go? Did she even want to? The man continued. "I'm not going to tell the airline to fire you. I'm going to recommend that you be required to undergo comprehensive training on bias and discrimination. I'm going to suggest you spend time volunteering in communities different from your own. I'm going to hope that you use this as an opportunity to examine your beliefs and grow as a person. But that's up to you. Change has to come from within." Margaret nodded approvingly. "That's very generous of you, sir." "Patricia, you should be grateful for this man's compassion. Many people would not be so forgiving." Patricia was led away by security, her career in shambles, her reputation destroyed. As she walked through the plane toward the exit, passengers stared at her with disgust and disappointment. Some shook their heads. Some whispered to each other. But no one defended her. No one felt sorry for her. She had done this to herself. As Patricia disappeared from view, the cabin erupted in applause again. The applause in first class continued for several moments, then gradually faded as passengers began to collect their belongings. But the energy in the cabin had completely transformed. What had been tension and anger was now something closer to solidarity. These strangers who had witnessed discrimination together now felt connected by a shared experience. The man in seat 2A gathered his briefcase from the overhead bin. Maya stood beside him, still somewhat in awe of everything that had happened. She had boarded this plane as a nervous young professional on her first business trip in first class. She was leaving as someone who had witnessed and documented an important moment. "What's your name?" the man asked her kindly. "I don't think we ever properly introduced ourselves." "Maya," she said. "Maya Patel." "It's nice to meet you, Maya," he said, extending his hand. "And thank you again for speaking up. That took real courage." "I just did what was right," Maya said. "But I'm curious. How do you stay so calm? If someone treated me that way, I don't think I could have kept my composure like you did." The man smiled sadly. "Years of practice, unfortunately. When you're a person of color in America, especially a successful one, you learn that your reaction to discrimination matters as much as the discrimination itself. If I had gotten angry, if I had raised my voice, I would have been the problem. People would have said I was difficult or aggressive. By staying calm, I made sure there was no question about who was in the wrong." Maya felt tears prick her eyes again. "That's so unfair. You shouldn't have to perform calmness just to be believed." "No, I shouldn't," he agreed. "But that's the world we live in. For now, anyway. Maybe one day it will be different." As they moved toward the exit, passenger after passenger stopped the man to shake his hand, to thank him, to tell him they would be reporting what they witnessed. The elderly couple promised to write to the airline. James, the entrepreneur, said he was already compiling all the video footage from passengers to create a comprehensive record of the incident. Margaret, the British woman, gave the man her card and said if he ever needed a witness for anything, she would be there. "You have an army of supporters now," she told him with a warm smile. "We won't let this be swept under the rug." The man thanked each person sincerely. But Maya could see how exhausted he was. This should have been a simple flight. Instead, it had turned into a battle, and even though he had won, there was no joy in the victory. As they deplaned, something unexpected happened. Word had spread beyond just the passengers on the flight. Airport staff had heard about the incident. News travels fast in airports, especially when it involves someone famous. As the man walked through the jet bridge into the terminal, a gate agent standing nearby started clapping. Then another agent joined in. Then a cleaning crew member. Then passengers waiting for other flights. The applause spread through the gate area like ripples in water. People who didn't even know what they were clapping for joined in, because everyone else was doing it. The man looked embarrassed and tried to wave it off, but the applause continued. It grew louder. More people joined in. Maya walked beside him, her phone out and recording. This moment needed to be captured, not for the drama, but because it represented something important. It showed that when people witness injustice, when they see discrimination exposed, they want to stand with the victim. They want to make it clear that such behavior is not acceptable. A young girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, broke away from her mother and ran up to the man. "Are you the nice man from the airplane?" she asked. The man crouched down to her eye level. "I am. What's your name?" "Emma," the girl said. "My mom told me that a lady was mean to you on the plane because of how you look." "That's not nice. You seem very nice." The man's eyes glistened. "Thank you, Emma. That means a lot to me. And you're right, it wasn't nice. But you know what? A lot of people stood up for me. They told that lady she was wrong. And that's what we should all do when we see someone being treated unfairly. Can you remember that?" Emma nodded seriously. "I will. I promise." The girl's mother came over, apologizing for the interruption. But the man waved off her apology. "No need to apologize. Your daughter just made my day better." As they continued through the terminal, the man's phone began buzzing constantly. Calls, texts, notifications. His team had seen the social media posts. News outlets were asking for statements. The incident was trending on multiple platforms. The man sighed and looked at his phone. "I suppose I need to deal with this," he said to Maya. "The story is out there now. I can't ignore it." "What will you say?" Maya asked. "The truth," he replied. "That discrimination is still a daily reality for many people. That we need to do better as a society. That companies need to train their employees properly. And that we all have a responsibility to speak up when we see injustice." They reached the main terminal. The man's assistant was waiting for him, along with 2 members of his security team. The assistant, a woman in her 30s, looked worried. "Sir, this is blowing up," she said, holding up her tablet. "It's on every major news site. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, it's everywhere. The airline stock is already dropping. They've issued a preliminary statement apologizing and promising an investigation. And you have interview requests from CNN, ABC, NBC, and about 20 other outlets." The man rubbed his temples. "Set up a press conference for tomorrow morning. I'll make one statement and then I want to move on. I have actual work to do in LA. He turned to Maya. "What are your plans while you're here?" "I have a tech conference to attend," Maya said. "It starts tomorrow." "Which conference?" The man asked. Maya told him, and his eyebrows raised. "That's interesting. I'm speaking at that conference. Maybe I'll see you there." Maya's mouth fell open. "You're giving the keynote speech." "I had no idea." The man laughed, genuinely amused. "Well, now you have a story to tell people when you talk about why you decided to stand up for a stranger on a plane." They exchanged contact information, with the man insisting that if Maya ever needed anything, especially career advice or mentorship, she should reach out. "You showed character today," he told her. "That's more valuable than any degree or skill. Don't lose that." As the man walked away with his team, Maya stood in the terminal watching him go. She pulled out her phone and opened Twitter. Her earlier post about the incident had gone viral. Thousands of retweets, tens of thousands of likes, comments from celebrities, politicians, civil rights activists. The story had touched a nerve because it was a story everyone could understand. Discrimination laid bare, justice served, at least partially. She began composing a new tweet. Update on the flight incident. The passenger who was discriminated against showed incredible grace. He didn't want the flight attendant fired. He wants her to learn and grow. He turned a moment of hatred into a teaching moment. That's real leadership. That's who we should all aspire to be. Within minutes, this tweet was also going viral. People were sharing it, adding their own stories of discrimination, discussing the importance of education over punishment, debating how society should handle these situations. The conversation was bigger than one plane, one flight attendant, one incident. It had become a national dialogue. Meanwhile, at a holding area in the airport, Patricia sat alone with the security officers watching her. The station manager had told her she could not leave until she had been officially interviewed by airline management, and possibly by lawyers. Her phone was in her bag, but she was afraid to look at it. She knew what she would find. Her name was probably already out there. People were probably calling her terrible things. Her life as she knew it was over. Jessica, the young flight attendant, came to check on her. She had finished her duties on the plane and was about to head home. "How are you holding up?" Jessica asked. Patricia looked up, her eyes red and swollen.
How do you think?
Jessica sat down beside her. "I know you're hurting right now. And I know you're scared, but maybe this needed to happen." "What do you mean?" Patricia asked bitterly. "I've worked with you for 2 years," Jessica said carefully, "and I've seen you treat passengers differently based on how they look. I've heard you make comments about who belongs in first class and who doesn't. I should have said something sooner. I should have reported it. But I didn't, and I'm sorry for that." Patricia stared at her. "You think I'm racist?" "I think you have biases that you've never examined," Jessica said. "We all have them. But most of us don't act on them the way you did today, and now you have a choice. You can spend the rest of your life angry and defensive, blaming everyone but yourself. Or you can use this as a wake-up call. You can do the hard work of examining your beliefs and changing them." "It's too late," Patricia said. "My career is over. My reputation is destroyed." "What's the point?" "The point is becoming a better person," Jessica said. "Not for your career. Not for other people. For yourself. Don't you want to look in the mirror and be proud of who you see?" Jessica left Patricia sitting there with those words hanging in the air. Back in the terminal, the man had given a brief statement to the gathered reporters who had somehow found him. He spoke eloquently about the need for empathy, understanding, and systemic change. He praised the passengers who had stood up for him. He thanked the airline for their quick response, and he expressed hope that this incident would lead to meaningful discussions about bias and discrimination. "I don't want this to be just about me," he said to the cameras. "Every day people experience discrimination in big and small ways. Most of them don't have platforms to share their stories. Most of them suffer in silence. I'm speaking up not just for myself, but for all of them. We can do better. We must do better." The statement was everything the airline could have hoped for. Instead of attacking them, he had been gracious and forward-thinking. Their stock stabilized. Social media sentiment began to shift from anger at the airline to admiration for the man and his handling of the situation. By the time evening fell over Los Angeles, the incident had become the top trending story on most social media platforms. Think pieces were being written. Companies were reviewing their anti-discrimination policies. Airlines were scheduling emergency training sessions for their staff. The conversation had gone national, then international. Maya checked into her hotel and turned on the news. The story was the lead on every channel. She saw footage from the terminal, the applause, the man's statement. She saw interviews with other passengers from the flight, all confirming the discrimination they had witnessed. She even saw herself in some of the background footage walking beside the man through the terminal. Her phone rang. It was her boss from New York. "Maya, I just saw the news," her boss said. "That was you on that flight, wasn't it?" Maya's heart sank. Was she in trouble for being involved? "Yes, it was me." "I'm so proud of you," her boss said, surprising her. "Standing up like that took guts. You represented yourself and our company well. When you get back, I want to talk to you about a promotion. We need people with your kind of character in leadership positions." Maya hung up the phone in a daze. What had started as the worst flight of her life had somehow turned into a defining moment in her career. Over the following days, the story continued to evolve. The airline announced a comprehensive review of their training programs and policies. Patricia was officially suspended without pay pending the investigation. Multiple passengers provided their video footage and statements. News outlets ran segments on racial profiling and customer service. But perhaps the most important impact was the conversation that happened in homes across the country. Parents talked to their children about discrimination and bias. Teachers discussed the incident in classrooms. Businesses reviewed their own policies. People examined their own prejudices and assumptions. 3 weeks after the flight, the man was invited to speak before Congress about discrimination in the airline industry. He used the platform to call for better training, stricter enforcement of anti-discrimination policies, and more diversity in corporate leadership. And Patricia? After the investigation concluded, she was offered a choice. She could accept termination with a severance package, or she could enroll in an intensive 6-month program focused on bias training, cultural sensitivity, and community service. If she completed the program successfully, she could potentially be reinstated in a non-customer-facing role. Patricia chose the program. It wasn't easy. She had to confront beliefs she had held her entire life. She had to volunteer in communities she had always avoided. She had to listen to stories from people whose experiences were nothing like her own. But slowly, painfully, she began to change. Not because she wanted her job back, but because she finally understood the harm she had caused, not just to the man on the flight, but to countless others over the years. The incident on Flight 447 became a case study in how social media can expose injustice and drive change. But more than that, it became a reminder that ordinary people have extraordinary power when they choose to speak up. Maya, James, Margaret, and all the other passengers who refused to stay silent had helped create a moment that mattered. And the man at the center of it all continued his work, using his platform and resources to fight for a more just world. The incident on the plane was just one day in his life. But for many others, it was a wake-up call. A reminder that discrimination is not a thing of the past. A call to action for everyone who believes in equality and justice. Sometimes change comes from grand gestures and sweeping legislation. But sometimes it comes from ordinary people on an ordinary flight who decide that enough is enough, who decide that silence is complicity, who decide to stand up and speak out, even when it's uncomfortable or risky. The applause that day in the terminal was not just for one man. It was an applause for justice, for dignity, for the belief that everyone deserves to be treated with respect, regardless of who they are or what they look like. It was an applause for the kind of world we all want to live in, a world where Patricia's behavior is the exception, not the rule. A world where people like Maya don't hesitate to speak up when they see wrong. A world where skin color doesn't determine how you're treated in first class or anywhere else. That applause echoed far beyond that terminal. It echoed in courtrooms and boardrooms and classrooms. It echoed in the hearts of everyone who has ever been made to feel less than, and it continues to echo today. A reminder that the fight for justice and equality is never finished, but that every voice raised against injustice brings us one step closer to the world we deserve.